The decree came down from the Grand Regime Council on a cold morning across 1,000 worlds. Human vessels were no longer permitted to travel through Imperial space. Their ships would be impounded. Their crews would be detained. Their cargo would be seized and redistributed among proper citizens of the Empire. The announcement played on every screen, every broadcast terminal, every public address system from the core worlds to the Outer Rim. Chancellor Vorath stood at his podium with his forearms clasped behind his back, his silver scales gleaming under the lights of the council chamber. He spoke with absolute certainty about the dangers of allowing these strange apes to move freely among civilized species. The humans had only been part of galactic society for 40 years. In that short time, they had spread to dozens of colonies. They built stations in places no other species wanted. They traded goods that nobody else could produce. They offered services that seemed impossible. And worst of all, they did it all without asking permission from the regime. Captain Jenna Cole received the news while her freighter was docked at Station Kepler 7. She sat in a small mess hall with her crew of 12 humans and watched the broadcast with growing anger. Her first mate, Marcus Webb, slammed his fist on the table. "They cannot do this," he said. "We have trading contracts. We have obligations. Half the outer colonies depend on our supply runs." Jenna raised her hand to calm him. She had been running cargo through Imperial space for 15 years. She knew how the regime worked. They made grand declarations. They passed harsh laws. But enforcement was another matter entirely. "We wait," she said. "We see what happens." What happened was exactly what she expected. The Imperial fleet began stopping human ships within days. They confiscated everything: cargo, fuel, personal belongings. Some crews were thrown into detention centers. Others were simply abandoned on whatever station they happened to be near. Within 2 weeks, human shipping through Imperial space dropped to zero. The outer colonies started feeling the effects almost immediately. Station Meridian ran out of medical supplies. Colony Thrace lost its shipment of agricultural equipment. The mining outpost on Buran Prime had no spare parts for their drilling machines. These places had always relied on human traders, because human traders went where others refused to go. The routes were too long. The margins were too thin. The risks were too high. But humans took those jobs anyway. Ambassador Kellex of the Vorath regime received complaints from 12 planetary governors within the first month. He dismissed them all. The humans were a nuisance, he explained. The Empire had survived for 10,000 years without them. It would survive another 10,000 after they were gone. But the complaints kept coming. They grew louder. They became demands. Governor Thren of the Outer Territories sent an urgent message to the Grand Council. His words were simple but desperate. People were dying, not from war, not from plague, from simple shortages that could have been prevented if supply ships were still running. He begged for an exception to the ban. He'd promised to personally guarantee the behavior of any human crews allowed to return. Chancellor Vorath denied his request. 3 months after the ban, the situation had become a crisis. 17 outer colonies reported critical shortages. 4 had declared states of emergency. The economy of the entire Outer Rim was collapsing. Trade between worlds slowed to a fraction of its former volume. Other species tried to fill the gap left by human traders, but they could not. The routes were too dangerous. The profits were too small. The work was too hard. Admiral Krasix of the 7th Imperial Fleet was given orders to maintain the blockade against human vessels. He carried out those orders with perfect discipline. His ships patrolled the major shipping lanes. They stopped and searched any vessel that looked like it might be human. They turned back dozens of ships and arrested hundreds of crew members. But Admiral Krasix was also receiving reports from his own officers. The stations under his protection were running low on supplies. His own ships needed parts that could only be obtained from human manufacturers. The fuel cells they used were becoming scarce because humans ran the most efficient refineries in the sector. He began to understand something that Chancellor Varath had failed to consider. Humans were not just traders. They were the glue holding the outer regions together. Captain Jenna Cole had spent those 3 months at a small independent station just outside Imperial territory. She kept her ship in good condition. She waited for the situation to change. She knew it would. It had to. The change came in the form of a secret message from Governor Thren. He was willing to pay triple the normal rate for a supply run to his colony. He would guarantee safe passage through his territory. He would provide protection from Imperial patrols. All Jenna had to do was deliver the goods his people needed to survive. She accepted the job. Her ship, the Wandering Star, departed at midnight. Marcus plotted a course that would avoid the main shipping lanes. They jumped from system to system, staying away from Imperial sensors. For 2 weeks, they traveled in silence and darkness, moving like ghosts through the space between stars. They reached Governor Thren's colony without incident. The people there greeted them like heroes. Jenna watched as her cargo was unloaded. Medical supplies, food stores, machine parts, water purification tablets. Things that seemed ordinary but had become precious in their absence. Governor Thren met her personally at the docking bay. He was a tall being with rough gray skin and tired eyes. He thanked her in a voice thick with emotion. Then he asked her a question that changed everything. Would you be willing to do this again? Jenna thought about the risk. She thought about the ban. She thought about the people who would die if she said no. Yes, she told him. Word spread through the outer colonies. Human traders were still operating. They were defying the ban. They were saving lives. Other human captains began to follow Jenna's example. They established secret routes. They developed coded communication systems. They created a network of hidden supply chains that the Imperial fleet could not find. Admiral Krasix became aware of this network after 6 months. He faced a choice. He could increase patrols and try to shut it down. Or he could acknowledge the reality of the situation. The ban was failing. The outer colonies needed human traders. His own fleet needed human goods. Fighting against this truth would only make things worse. He sent a private message to Chancellor Varath recommending that the ban be reconsidered. The Chancellor refused. 1 year after the original decree, the situation had become impossible to ignore. 3 major colonies had formally requested to leave the Empire. 12 more were threatening to follow. The economy of the Outer Rim had contracted by 40%. Imperial authority was weakening with each passing day. Chancellor Varath called an emergency session of the Grand Council. He demanded more ships for enforcement. He demanded harsher penalties for anyone caught trading with humans. He demanded loyalty from the governors who had been complaining. What he received instead was a vote of no confidence. The council removed Chancellor Varath from power that same day. They appointed a new leader, a pragmatic woman named Councillor Merchers, who had opposed the ban from the beginning. Her first act was to lift the restrictions on human vessels. Her second act was to issue a formal apology to the human trading communities that had been harmed. But Councillor Merchers understood that simply ending the ban was not enough. The damage had been done. Trust had been broken. Humans might choose to stay away from Imperial space, even without legal restrictions. She needed to do something dramatic, something that would prove the Empire had changed. She called Admiral Krasix to her office. She gave him new orders. The 7th Imperial Fleet would no longer patrol for human ships. Instead, they would escort them. They would protect human traders from pirates. They would guarantee safe passage through dangerous regions. They would actively enforce the presence of humans in Imperial space. Admiral Krasix carried out these orders with the same discipline he had shown before. His ships began accompanying human freighters on their routes. They chased away threats. They provided fuel and supplies when needed. They treated human crews with respect and courtesy. Captain Jenna Cole was among the first to benefit from this new policy. An Imperial warship appeared alongside the Wandering Star as she traveled to Colony Thrace. The captain of that warship introduced himself over the communication channel. He said his name was Commander Vasek. He said he would be her escort for the journey. Jenna did not trust him at first. How could she? The Empire had hunted her people for a year. They had taken everything from human traders. They had caused suffering across dozens of worlds. But Commander Vasek proved himself over the following weeks. He kept his word. He protected her ship. He asked for nothing in return. By the end of that journey, Jenna had begun to change her mind about the Empire, not about what it had done. That could never be forgiven, but about what it might become. 2 years after the original ban, human traders were more common in Imperial space than they had ever been before. The supply chains had recovered. The outer colonies were thriving again. The economy was stronger than it had been in decades. And the Imperial fleet continued its escort missions, actively enforcing human presence in regions where they had once been forbidden. Ambassador Kellix, who had supported the ban so strongly, was forced to acknowledge the truth during a public speech. The Empire needed humans, not because humans were superior, not because other species were inferior, but because humans were willing to do work that nobody else wanted to do. They went to dangerous places. They took impossible jobs. They kept their promises even when it cost them everything. Councillor Murtris made this relationship official through a new treaty. Humans were granted permanent trading rights throughout Imperial space. Their ships would be protected by Imperial forces. Their contracts would be enforced by Imperial law. In exchange, humans agreed to maintain their supply routes to the outer colonies and to share their technical knowledge with Imperial engineers. Captain Jenna Cole attended the signing ceremony as a representative of the human trading community. She stood beside Councillor Murtris as the documents were formalized. Reporters asked her what she thought about the agreement. She paused before answering. She remembered the early days of the ban. She remembered hiding from Imperial patrols. She remembered the fear and the anger and the determination that had kept her going. She remembered the people who had welcomed her cargo like it was a gift from the heavens. "We never wanted conflict," she said finally. "We just wanted to work. We just wanted to help. All we ever asked was the chance to prove ourselves. Now we have that chance. And we intend to use it well." The Imperial fleet maintained its escort duties for years after that. Human ships traveled through the stars with warships at their sides. Former enemies became allies. Former hunters became guardians. The ban that was meant to drive humans away had ultimately secured their place in the galaxy forever. And in the outer colonies, where the effects of that ban had been felt most deeply, people told stories about the human traders who had defied an empire to bring them hope. They spoke of Captain Cole and her crew. They spoke of the secret routes and the hidden supply chains. They spoke of the day when Imperial ships arrived not to arrest, but to protect. Those stories became legends, and those legends ensured that nobody would ever forget what humans had proven through their stubborn refusal to give up. That sometimes the smallest species in the galaxy could make the biggest difference. That courage mattered more than strength. That kindness could defeat cruelty. And that trying to ban humans from the stars was the surest way to guarantee they would never leave.